Hi, I'm Katie Wilkinson. I'm the market executive for Fulton Bank here in Delaware, and I'm proud to serve as the State Chamber Board Chair as well. Thank you for joining this breakout session. We are going to talk this morning about office redesign in the midst of a pandemic. Why is this important? It's relevant and it's timely as so many organizations are working to return to their offices. We need to look at employee safety and customer safety. I'm happy to have two experts with us this morning to give us both a regional and a local view of what's going on. First is Dana Verbosch, project designer with Gensler. We're happy to have her with us, and our own Chris Buccini, who is the co-president of the Buccini Pollen Group. I'd like to start with Dana. Dana, tell us about Gensler and give us some thoughts on how you are preparing to return to the workplace for your own company and for your clients. Thanks.
Thanks, Katie, for that introduction. As you mentioned, my name is Dana Verbosch. I'm an interior designer with Gensler. I've been with Gensler for 7 years. I've been in the industry for 12 years, all of those 12 years in Baltimore, Maryland. Next slide, please. Gensler is the world's largest architecture and design firm. We have 50 offices worldwide. We have over 6,000 employees. We have a lot to brag about. We've been named one of the best places to work, the most admired design firm, and we reach globally thousands of clients every year. We've been working for 50 plus years. We're very well known for our innovation in workplace design, but we actually reach a broad range of sectors and organizations. Next slide. We reach across 26 practice areas, which is, our way of saying sectors, that range from your standard workplace, corporate office to government and defense. We work with developers on mixed use and master planning. We work in sports arena, and we even work on things like product development, furniture, light fixtures, and environmental graphics and brand design. So you've probably experienced a space that we've touched, that we've worked in. We reach pretty much any type of public space you can think of. Next slide, please. Gensler is steeped in research. We launched the Gensler Research Institute about 15 years ago to really understand the balance between design and performance. So the solutions that we are providing, the decisions that we are making, are they really working? And with a client base such as ours, we're able to cull that information in real time from real people who are really using the space. So we developed a survey that we sent out to vast array of clients, client types. We range our work with organizations of anywhere from 15 people to 15,000 people. So we recognize there's not a one-size-fits-all solution when you're working with a range of organizations like that. So the survey really helps us understand where people are coming from, how they're working, what's working, and just as importantly, what's not working. So since 2006, we've published those survey results, which are accessible to anyone. You can go to gensler.com and see those survey results right online. And of course, we just launched our 2020 survey results as well. Next slide. So we are, I'm not the first person to say that this is an unprecedented time. And Gensler, at Gensler, we understand that there's a lot to be learned through what we're all experiencing right now. Whether you're able to work from home or not, there's a lot of learning that could happen that really impacts the future of work, the future of workplace, not just what happens today or tomorrow, but what happens over the next 5 years, over the next 10 years. So we saw this opportunity and really wanted to do the same. We wanted to research and hear from our clients. Next slide. So we listened, and we've had over 325 roundtable discussions with, again, that wide range of clients, from local to global, from education to workplace to healthcare to hospitality. We created a platform for our clients to talk to each other and for us to just listen. While we see ourselves as experts, none is a greater expert than you, than those who are working themselves and doing the day-to-day tasks. So through these conversations, a lot of questions were raised. There's not a ton of solutions because we can't really predict the future, but we've realized that there's a lot of common ground through a wide array of organizations. Again, no matter what sector that they're in, that really apply across a broad range. And we as Gensler asked ourselves, how can we help? What can we do? How do we take this information, really understand it, and be able to bring it back to you, bring it back to our clients, so we can all learn from this moment. Next slide. So using the survey tool as a vehicle, much like we have in the past, we crafted a new survey that's specific to work from home. We wanted to understand, are people productive? Are people happy? What are they missing? Are people going to come back to the office? That's been a big question since everyone sort of was forced into working from home overnight. The biggest finding that you'll see in bold on the slide is that, surprisingly, only 12% of US workers want to work from home full time. There's a number of people who see some positive change in implementing some work from home strategy, but there's definitely a desire to be back together, to be back in the workplace. Next slide, please. So some of those key findings, in addition to that metric, is people want to be back together. They want to be face-to-face with their colleagues, have in-person meetings. Those ad hoc impromptu get-togethers are not as seamless, not as easy in this work from home world as they were when you're together in the office. We also heard that some of the younger generations are really struggling to work from home. There's a lot of reason behind that that we'll get to in a minute, but that is problematic if we're talking about a longer, broader work from home strategy or teleworking strategy. And then we also heard from a vast majority that people do expect to come back to the office, but they expect the office to look and feel much different. Next slide. So when we're talking about our workers that want to come back to the workplace, we have 9 top reasons that we heard from during the survey, a lot of which you'll see are really about being together physically, but some of it is also about focusing. Oftentimes people work in a situation, they have children at home or a spouse that also works, or roommates, or some sort of situation that doesn't allow them to focus at home as easily as maybe we thought. So the office could be a place to go and to have some focus time. Having client-facing meetings, or even for people who have consumer-facing industry or work, you need that face-to-face interaction. There's a lot lost over technology. And one thing I don't think a lot of folks are talking about is access to mentors and supervisors around professional development. There's a lot to be said for impromptu conversation, or even just seeing each other on a day-to-day basis that really fosters an environment where mentorship can happen. And again, that sort of gets lost in this work from home world. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, some of the younger generations are struggling to work from home. There's a lot of distraction. You might live in a small place that doesn't have a home office. You might have roommates, etc. And they're finding it hard to avoid distractions while at home, while some of the older generations are kind of flourishing in this work from home environment. All of this can sort of be considered as we talk about future implications to what our workplace looks like. We don't want to really apply one sweeping statement across all of our workforce, because some are thriving and some are not in this environment. So how do we craft a balance for the future of our workplace that allows for people to flourish, where we don't lose that knowledge gap when, if we're sending older generations that really have all the institutional knowledge home to work from home because they're flourishing there and bring our younger generations back to work, you're really stretching that knowledge gap between those younger and older generations and where that knowledge lives. So that all should be considered as well as we start to look to the future. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, as we return to the workplace, we all expect to return to something different. What are those changes? What are people expecting? The first three major elements that we heard from our workforce is around policy change. Are people feeling like when they're sick, they cannot come into the office? How are organizations enforcing stricter sick policies? Are opportunities to work from home increased more so than they were before because of what we're hearing? All of these are really important, and again, in sort of no matter what industry you're in, but no matter what change is implemented, no matter what people expect, the one way to really make sure that your workforce, that your consumers feel confident is through communication. Gensler offers a service that we call change management that helps organizations understand a schedule and cadence of communication that's beyond just an email saying, hey, we're looking into more hand sanitizer in our office. There's, some thought should be had around direct video communication, as well as collateral created, a schedule of events, etc. That transparency and that sort of connectivity from the workforce to the broader decisions that are being made around this change is going to be essential in instilling that confidence. And then alternately, if you have a customer business, that communication to your customers, as I'm sure you've seen as a customer yourself, is really important to understand what you're doing to ensure their safety as best as you can per local, state, and CDC guidelines, and how you're also ensuring the safety of your employees as well. So everybody sort of understands all the moving parts and pieces and the multiple facets to these considerations as you move forward. Next slide, please. So what does this all mean? How does this change the way we work? What is the role of the office now? There's a lot of questions, again, that's come up, and while, as I said, we can't predict the future, there's a lot of considerations that we've assembled based on what we've heard, based on our conversations with not only tenants, but building owners and landlords as well. Next slide, please. So we know that we're going to have to approach this in the immediate future. What happens today? What happens tomorrow? How do we manage this through the ongoing pandemic, which is, timeline TBD? And what's the reimagined future? What is the role of the workplace in the future? How does this impact the future of the workplace itself? Next slide. So like I said, we've put together some considerations based on those CDC guidelines. Of course, every local jurisdiction is different, so I encourage everyone to be familiar with your local jurisdiction's guidelines. But these are really things that we can think about in our buildings. Now, this is specific to office buildings, but really could be applied. A lot of these factors could really be applied across manufacturing, across healthcare and hospitality. A lot of it really boils down to this idea of safety and wellness being a focus. Next slide, please. So as we start to think about the building itself, we have to think about how people interact with the building. What happens when you walk in? What does security look like now? Are there wellness checks, temperature checks? Is there a place to sort of quarantine should you find someone ill or with a temperature? How does vertical circulation work? You have to think about how many people fit in an elevator. Where do people queue because you can't fit that many people in an elevator anymore? How are fire stairs supplementing that vertical circulation in a non-emergency event? And even down to building ventilation. How are you getting natural air in to help circulate, knowing that this virus in particular is spread often through airborne particles? Next slide. Of course, as you start to think about multi-tenant spaces, or even as a large organization, you've got restrooms that you have to deal with. How are you directing circulation in those restrooms? Are you implementing touchless fixtures if you didn't have them before? How are you really informing those to understand social distancing in such a small confined area like that. Wayfinding and signage is really important. Again, I can't stress enough, if you take away one thing, it's really focusing on communication with others. Some of it may seem intuitive and you may assume that people know to do these things, but it's really important to continue that communication, especially as it supports your policies, the building's policies, et cetera. There's also increased cleaning that everyone, of course, needs to consider, but communicating that, again, a lot of cleaning happens behind the scenes, but letting people know that that's happening is really important. It's also a consideration around your personal workspace. How many tchotchkes do you have? Should you really be keeping that stuff in the workspace? How is technology being shared, et cetera? Next slide, please. And then for the individual workspace, you have to consider circulation, you have to consider density. You might de-densify, maybe it's not a furniture change, but it's just the placement of employees as they come back. You know, we're often hearing, and within our organization as well, that as people return, it's on a volunteer basis. We're not going to be back 100% for quite some time. So we're allowing people to make that decision for themselves if they feel safe, if they feel comfortable. Many organizations are taking that route if they're able to, and that allows for more space per each individual. It also might mean shutting down some of those amenities day one, thinking about how they're utilized, or creating some protocols that weren't in place before around access to things like a pantry. Next slide, please. And then there's, specific elements within a workplace itself, the conference rooms and offices, collaboration in food space, things to think about where people normally gathered in groups, how policy might change how we gather in groups a little bit. And of course, it's really about that distancing and limiting space. And then if you have outdoor areas, how do you make them more accessible? How do you make them a place of work, a place of meeting where you can have that distance and you have that open air situation that is healthier and better than smaller enclosed meeting spaces. Next slide. So, as I mentioned, we're sort of looking at this in, the immediate, the ongoing, and the future. So if we just focus on health in the immediate and communication around that, that's really the most important, making sure our workforce is healthy and safe, and then utilizing these learnings as we start to understand the impact of our workforce, how people are working from home, if an organization wants to continue down teleworking, how is that impacting in the near future, and then of course reimagining the workplace. Now we're really getting to the very nitty-gritty of what we actually need to get work done. So the workplace might look a lot different in the future in order to support that. Next slide. So with that being said, we have a lot of challenges to face ahead of us, and we as an organization are excited to work together with our clients. We're facing the same questions ourselves as a large firm of 50 plus offices and over 6,000 people worldwide. And the best thing that we feel like we can do, as I mentioned before, is communicate out. So Gensler has a lot of resources. I encourage everyone to visit our blog called Dialogue, where we are posting many of our thought leadership pieces, what we're hearing from clients as they relate to workplace, but as they relate to additional industries, like I mentioned, education, healthcare, hospitality. So many are impacted by this pandemic and these choices that we need to make. We are doing our best to communicate out what we're learning, because we are all in this together. Thank you. I'll turn it over to Chris Buccini.
Great.
Buccini Polling Group.
Thank you so much, Dana. That was a lot more impressive than anything I'm going to say, and I'm really glad that we convinced you to join our panel today. My name is Chris Buccini. I'm co-president of the Buccini Polling Group, and I'm the lucky guy that gets to run our office business, which means that we oversee about 6 million square feet of office space surrounding Philly suburbs, Pittsburgh, Northern Delaware, Baltimore, and over the years in and out of Washington, D.C. But a lot of our office space really runs the gamut. Most of it is Class A, and given that we have a large concentration in Newcastle County, we have a lot of financial service firms. So a lot of large global businesses that are headquartered outside of Delaware, but have large presences here with considerable employees. I'd also like to say I am the beneficiary of Dana's handiwork. Gensler recently built a new headquarters for BPG in the Brandywine building in the city of Wilmington, Delaware. And so, it sort of falls under it's better to be lucky than good. We moved into a modern space in the fall, and where we had really created Zoom and Teams and a paperless technology, so that we were sort of ready for the move to going online like that. But at BPG, we've been headquartered here in Wilmington, Delaware for the last 26 years. And today I'm going to share a little bit of our experience over the last 5 months of working side by side with our tenants, and really trying to get people, helping them think about their reentry back to the workspace. So as part of that, we feel strongly as a company that our job is really to be the leaders back into the workspace. So about 6 weeks ago, we brought back our employees, mostly volunteers. And 4 weeks ago, it was everyone came back, but those that had a reason to stay home, and vulnerability or childcare, things of that nature. So we have about 100 people back in our workspace here in the city of Wilmington. We're a bit lonely here right now. But the point really was for us to sort of create a reentry plan that works for all of our buildings, and to really, quite frankly, figure out what was working, what wasn't working. We've leaned on the experts like Gensler, who have global businesses, who are in China right now, who are in Asia right now, who are really in the cities that are sort of reopening around the world. And interestingly enough, despite cultural differences between these communities, we're really all going through the same thing right now. So maybe I'll take a step back. When we did all move home to work from home, things were fine. It was, the first month, I'd say it was a very quick transition. And in some ways, we probably were closer than we've ever been. We started weekly Zoom town halls. We really came together with about our 400 Delaware employees. We came together in a way that we never had. But what we also found was, as a very sort of active team-based company, it was difficult for us to be doing the business we needed to remotely. And so we've seen sort of the difference of working from home and then coming back. We also have a lot of frontline workers, people, all the facilities people that run our office buildings, that run our apartment buildings, that run our hotels. And we also had an issue of, was it fair for for certain people to stay home while other people in our business were there on the front lines, every day. So it was an interesting issue that we faced as a company, and who we are and what we want to be. Reentry was interesting. As I said, 6 weeks ago when we came back, the first 2 days, everyone was very nervous, and human beings are resilient. And it was interesting that within basically 2 days, we found our new normal very, very quickly. And so as I speak today, I really speak both as a landlord, but also as a tenant, and having to really juggle both of those roles. And interestingly enough, I was surprised by how many people actually wanted to get back to the office. So, and I'm going to, the younger folks who live in a smaller apartment in Philadelphia might have been a lot more excited to get back to the office and get out of their apartment where they have a roommate than, say, maybe an older employee who lives in the suburbs in a house. And but very quickly we found sort of our new world order. The other thing I would like to say is we're not just in the office business, but we're an operating business. So, we had to really think about projects of ours like the Queen Theater that seats 1,200 people, or the Deco Food Hall, or the 76ers Field House, which has both, indoor and outdoor, Penn Cinema, the Beer Garden on the riverfront. So not only were we dealing with, office and residential and hotels, but we're also trying to figure out how do we reopen these in a safe way that brings people together, but also does it in a very, very safe way. So we put together, like most companies do, we created a task force, and it was really important to us to bring someone from every part of our business together. So we had HR, and we had the facilities and the property managers that oversee the facilities teams. We had our HVAC experts, we had our security experts, we had the asset managers, and then we had the leasing team. And we spent about 4 weeks coming together. I'm going to get this number wrong, but I think it was something like, oh, I'm sorry, we probably the most important group was our design team, because as Dana said, in times like this, communication is paramount. People, it's a very divisive issue, and I'd say half of people are a lot more conservative about their approach to coronavirus, and the other half are maybe a little bit more aggressive and liberal in their approach. And so communication was key. I think this is about right. We had to create 6,000 signs. So and the signage is for the buildings of, from how do you get out of the parking garage, through the plaza, into the lobby, into the queue for the elevator line, into the elevator, up to the space, to the bathroom. A lot of signs. So our design team really spent a lot of time, creating that, and they actually even created a logo that calls BPG at Work. The other thing we really embraced was, and IT was part of our task force, was the use of technology. And one of the reasons why I think this change will create long-lasting effects on the way we all do business is because of where we are in the technology cycle right now. And there's just a lot of great technology that today lets us work remotely better than ever before. But it's also going to let us work together in our office space better than we otherwise could have. So every morning, everyone in our, we created a partnership with Christiana Care, and everyone gets a text every morning, and it asks a series of questions about, do you have a fever? Do you have a cough? How are you feeling today? Are you being tested for COVID? And so that's, as I'm brushing my teeth at 6 a.m, I get that, and that's when we start our day. But it's an important first step as we think of the daily reentry into our space. The one technology that we haven't used as much, or that we're not using at all, is contact tracing. We've been on the phone with companies that provide contact tracing, both that can do it for the state level, the county level, but also for us in the office. And what we found is that none of our tenants actually want contact tracing yet. So we're going to continue. I think we're going to continue to, and that's within the building. They don't want contact tracing. So I think for the time being, we won't use it, but we'll continue to speak about it. And a lot of what we're doing now, we got from Gensler. So I'm going to be careful about how much we talk about it. But everything we do comes from really the psychological standpoint of, will this make people feel more comfortable coming back to their job? And are we creating as safe as possible of a work environment for our employees? We believe we can create a safe space for people not to get COVID. But a lot of it is really around how do we make people feel comfortable that they're not going to get COVID as well. And I think a lot of it comes down to leadership and letting people know that you care and that it's very, very important to you. One thing we're spending a lot of time right now on is figuring out how can we, in a cost-effective way, test our employees every week. And people will say, well, you're not doing it every day. Well, you know what? You may not be doing it every day, but at least once a week gives you a benchmark. And if something does happen, it will stop the spread. It would stop any potential spreading. The problem is our county exec, Matt Myers, doing such a great job in our county of offering free testing that so many people are getting tested now in our community that the response time to get the information back is a lot longer today than it was even 2 weeks ago. So we're working, and I think by next week we'll have a way that we can, in a cost-effective way, test our employees that want to be tested, and I think most would, every week, because a lot of us are getting tested already, once a week, once every other week, and we believe that's important. As I spend every week many calls I have with the local heads or of the businesses that are in our buildings, and so I'm getting a lot of interesting feedback. And what we're seeing is there's just really a wait and see approach on when they're coming back. Whereas everyone thought, not everyone, most people thought they would be coming back in August in a limited basis. We're now seeing that get pushed back to after Labor Day. So we do think we will see tenants starting to come back then. We as a company will be ready for them to be coming back. I think it'll be a slowish ramp up through September, October, November, maybe all throughout the entire fall. And I think that's important. I mean, I personally believe every company should be starting that transition back to work. And it's not bringing everyone back necessarily, but perhaps it's bringing back the 20 to 30% of the employees that want to come back to their workspace. Because we think that then lets companies work out their reentry. Sorry here. And then we're also, it's an interesting time to be designing office buildings. We're designing a office tower in Pittsburgh for a financial service company, FNB Bank, a 28-story tower. And so here we are in this transition period of figuring out, okay, what does the modern post-COVID workspace look like? And in a lot of ways, it's the pendulum has swung back. Quite frankly, I always felt like it was stupid how dense office spaces were becoming. And I think we're going to hopefully see a swing away from that. But we saw companies packing in people to a ratio of one person per every 125 to 150 square feet. Just real estate isn't that expensive. So I think we'll get back to people, being one employee per every 200 or 225 or 250 square feet, which I think I think the open work environment works. It's just there's no need to pack people in so much. So I think we'll see that. I think we'll also start seeing more flexible work schedules. Technology allows for that in today's world. And we will, there's a great article in the Wall Street Journal last week about, probably people will be coming back in the near term, called the next year or so. Maybe certain people are only coming into the office every 2 or 3 days a week. But I think technology will allow for that to happen. And I think that will allow companies to de-densify their workspace in the short term as they figure out longer term solutions about new workstations and things of that nature. A few other interesting things. We're under construction on a new office building in North Wilmington, and the tenant actually changed their design, mid-design to remove about 50 workstations. So again, I think that's the immediate response. I think people are having there's probably never been more conversation about what a bathroom should look like in an office space. And you have some people who are now saying, hey, we're going to go all to single bathrooms, sort of what you would see in an ADA situation. I'm not sure if that's something that lasts, if that's a short-term thing, but that might be one byproduct of what's going on. Another interesting thing has been, in the building we're in here, in the Brandywine building, we've got the top few floors vacant and the bottom few floors vacant, and where everyone had always looked at the top few floors, now people are really interested in the bottom few floors, and they just don't want to be in an elevator as long as they want to be a quick walk up the stairwell. So I think that'll be interesting. Regardless of what happens, I'm excited because this will be a big reliever on the parking situations that we have. With such dense workspace, we really were running out of parking spots. And so as people de-densify, there'll be less people, which means they need less parking, which I think will be a big help. Lots, we spend our weeks talking about what does all this mean to the suburbs versus the cities? Will people now want to be in the suburbs versus the cities? We certainly know that what we refer to as urban suburban locations, the Wilmington Riverfront, a Conshohocken, a King of Prussia, which is either the riverfront's urban but feels a little bit more suburban, or a place like Conshohocken, a suburban feels a little bit more urban. They'll be the short-term winners, no question. But what does that mean to the center cities or the further out suburbs? That's going to be TBD. And as I wrap up my portion here before we get into a fireside chat without the fire, we're thinking a lot about what does this mean to Delaware specifically. And so I will tell you that thank God we're not in New York City. It's the first time in my career where I'm happy that I don't have substantial holdings in New York City, because New York City's always been the big winner, or even the center city Philly where we do have holdings. But when you think about getting your employees in via transit into the city and then getting them up into a 50-story tower, it's a heck of a lot easier, the transportation to the city of Wilmington, where we're not as dense, the office buildings and the elevators, there isn't much of a strain on elevators. So I do think a community like Delaware, Newcastle County, and the city of Wilmington are beneficiaries over in New York City. So I'm cautiously optimistic as to what that all means. I mean, if you talk to anyone who lives in Metro New York City, people are moving into the suburban communities outside of there. I'm hearing that suburban Philly, there's literally no supply of available homes because people are moving out of the city of Philly. And so I do think there will be some rollover into Newcastle County and actually all of Delaware, which is really exciting. I do think there's going to be a lot of wait and see here in Delaware, because so many of our companies are, as I said earlier, they're not headquartered here. And so the head of commercial real estate, for the big employers for many of the big employers in Delaware are based in New York City right now. So they're looking through a very different lens than, say, I am running my business out of Wilmington. It's just a very different situation that we're in. And of course, as a leader of a business, you really have to think about, well, what happens when we do get the vaccine next year? And I do think we will get one next year. What does this all mean? What do we go back to? What stays? What doesn't stay? And so do think there will be long-term changes. And but the pendulum will swing one way, and then they'll come back. And as we all know, unlike a hotel or even an apartment building, an office lease is multi-year. And so there are only maybe 10, 15, 20% of leases will expire in the next 18 months. And so I don't think there will be significant change in the offices over the next 18 months. It's really what happens after that. Dana, thank you for joining us today here in Delaware. And one of the things that we talk about a lot in our business is there are a lot of things we can be doing in a very cost-efficient way to create a safe reentry and a safe workspace for our employees and for our tenants' employees. But there's some stuff that's very expensive. Obviously, the whole touchless elevators, HVAC modifications, incredibly cost-effective. But I actually personally think that there's some low-touch ways to make them work. What are you all seeing with your client base, and are people coming back already and saying, hey, how do we change our elevators? How do we change our mechanicals? What's going on in Asia? What's going on in the US? Maybe you could touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, so we work with a wide range of clients, global multi-site clients, like I said, down to people who have, an organization of 15. So the solutions vary as widely as our clientele does. So we've definitely seen some tenants demand of their building owners significant change. Usually a lot of in large cities, anchor tenants really speaking to the landlord about those maybe more expensive solutions around upgrading filters in their building's HVAC system, changing hardware for elevators, et cetera. In some of our more, I'll say low tech solutions that we've seen, there's definitely just been some very simple solutions provided. For some of our Asian countries, in China, we've seen an example from actually one of our employees that is back to work in a building that Gensler occupies. They've seen something as simple as little toothpicks provided in the elevator that you can use to hit a button and throw it aside. That's just like stuck into a foam block, but it works. It goes a long way in making for a safe environment and making for people feeling safe. Again, it's sort of instilling that confidence. So, I think the story across the board is sort of don't panic. There should be a lot of thought and consideration to those larger, more expensive solutions when you're talking about impact across years. But there are, easy, inexpensive, low touch solutions that are implementable today, even as simple as toothpicks in an elevator, to really get people to feel comfortable and to be safer in those environments. So it's a wide array. And it really sort of depends on a building owner as well.
Great. Well, thank you. I mean, that's super helpful. And I saw that. So Gensler does, if you're on their their email list, and I think the State Chamber is going to post somewhere where you can start getting these emails from Gensler. But I've really enjoyed the experiences that you all are seeing in Asia for best practices. And I did see that one about the toothpicks. I would say, other than putting in a whole new HVAC system, which I'm not sure is necessary, there's a lot of lower tech answers on how to solve a lot of people's concerns. Question for you. So, what happens 3 years from now to the office world? Does every office building become vacant? Do people just work from home? My prediction, and I've actually seen, analyses of this, is the reality is you won't need as many people in the office every day, but to offset that, you will want people more spaced out. And so the net loss of office real estate, I don't think anyone expects to be that considerable. Maybe, I don't know if it's 5%, if it's 10%, maybe it's no percent. But what is sort of the conventional wisdom at Gensler as to the future of office, the future demand of office space? We've seen locally, Bank of America had moved a lot of people out of the office. And then after a few years, they realized it wasn't working so great, and they moved people back in. I think you saw that at Yahoo. You've seen that, people that had done this before. So, what's conventional wisdom at Gensler?
Yeah. So, again, to give another complicated answer, it really is about an organization and a culture. There is no our conventional wisdom around workplace in general is there is no one size fits all solution, right? And I think we learned a lot through this initial work from home survey, to back up your point. Offices aren't going away. People don't want to work from home full time. We saw only 12% over, I think it was 2,300 people that were surveyed really want to work from home full time. So we don't see workplace changing in that sense that there's going to be all this vacant office space. We do see the office itself changing. Those top 9 reasons I gave for people wanting to be back in the office, half of them were about being together, having that collaboration. We talked about mentorship and that connection. So office space might start to look different and be more focused around those gatherings. Of course, in the immediate future, pre-vaccine and even post-vaccine, as we start to think about this, happening again in the future, or maybe how we can just be more healthy and sanitary in our workplace, that space might grow in order to offer individuals having more space. Like you said, that square foot per person is likely to grow, but it might grow in ways that support more of those collaboration moments, those mentorship moments. Focus work is probably still going to happen in the office. You saw that there's still issues of people working from home and not being distracted and being able to focus, but it might not look like your traditional open office area anymore. It might look more like mini offices, mini private offices, or bigger workstations, especially again in the immediate future. So there's still a lot to be learned from this, I should say. Just our survey through this pandemic results in answers and emotions in this time. As we start to move back to the workplace and as we find our comfort level again and we feel safe and all of that, we'll want to continue to understand this information, because my feelings on working from home right now are centered around me being forced to work from home for 5 days a week, and it's driving me nuts. Personally, I want to get back to the office. I can't stand it. So, my feelings on working from home in 2 years from now are probably going to change. I'll probably be more willing to do so for a day or two a week to get that focus time that I don't need while I'm at the office. So I think as leases expire, as we see the opportunity for change to occur in a way that makes sense, I don't think there's a lot of interest in capital investing right now in massive change in an existing workspace that still has 5 years on their lease or 8 years on their lease. So it's, I think we're going to start to see the workplace shift in what it actually supports. That could be as simple as furniture change, or, even broader architectural changes. So I don't know, it didn't really give you a specific answer.
Absolutely. Yeah. Listen, I think anyone that says they know what's going to happen, they have no idea what's going to happen. But I think there's enough data out there to get a sense. And maybe that leads us to the last question I would throw out is, what should priorities be for Delaware businesses right now? What should they be implementing right now? What are we? We're 5 months into this. This could go on for a long time. No one knows. As a business leader, not as a landlord, we really felt it was important to have a plan in place and to start executing upon, the next normal. I think there's going to be phases of normal. And so, I personally think it's important that companies have their reentry plan in place. They're working with their landlords on that place, and they start getting their employees back in the office. And again, it might be 20%, it might be 30%, it might be 100%. But get your employees in place, start making sure that things work, and start also understanding the psychological component of bringing your employees back. And I think what happens when people are back working, the people who feel less secure, see they'll be able to talk to their co-workers who are back in the office, and they can ask questions and they can see how it's working out. But to me, it's all about putting the plan into place, start implementing it incrementally. What do you think, Dana? What should companies be thinking about?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Chris. I feel that, starting with a broader plan is really important. Again, I always encourage not to rush into anything. We've worked with a lot of clients in a very short amount of time to evaluate their existing plans. We've done it for a local court system. We've done it for workplace, of course. We're actually in Baltimore with one of our local higher education institutions going through a campus plan for them to understand what it means for students to come back to campus. So even just looking at how you can adhere to your local and CDC guidelines on a safe way to re-enter into, be it your workplace or your school or et cetera, it's a great place to start. Of course, the conversation around policy change needs to happen, and that is also something that's going to evolve with time as you start to learn. Implementing strategies like Buccini Poland has around partnering with a local healthcare provider to understand how everybody's feeling that morning, asking people to take their temperature. You're putting a lot of trust and faith in your workforce, but that's really important because they're putting a lot of trust and faith in their employers as well. And of course, I don't know if you all had a dime for every time I said the word communication, you'd all be rich by now, but that is the utmost important thing. And it's so much more than just an email. Your workforce should feel connected to solutions. They should have a platform to provide feedback. It's a strategy, both as you're building your collateral, but as you're speaking to people, you should lean on the other trusted advisors in your organization to help support change in policy and the return back, and find all of those platforms. So it's sort of a combination, right, of understanding tactically what you're going to do, where you're putting hand sanitizer, should you be implementing touchless entry points at, if you have a speed entry, et cetera. There's really tactical things. How many people can actually come back safely while still adhering to CDC guidelines? That's really important. And then, like you said, that reassuring to your workforce that you're doing everything you possibly can. Nothing is guaranteed in this world. We know that, but you're doing everything that you possibly can as an organization to try to keep your workforce safe. And alternately to your consumers, again, when you have a consumer-facing business, the same treatment should go out to your consumers. What are you doing to keep them safe? How are you making it easier for them to make decisions or approach your business? What are your cleaning protocols? It seems a little simple and straightforward. And like I said, don't make assumptions that people know you're just going to wipe down surfaces more often. Let them know that that level of comfort goes a long way. And giving people choice, I should say, too, a choice of where to work, how to work, if they're comfortable coming back. We all live in different situations. We all impact others through this whole pandemic. So giving people that choice and making them feel like they have agency over their own health and wellness is really important.
Well, I'm laughing because you have just reminded me that I need to send another letter to communicate to all my tenants, because we've been doing a series of communications to our tenants,
right,
letting them know what's going on and how we're approaching this. And I think we're ready for the next letter. So thank you for the communication. There's one last question I had been asked to address, and that was, what does all this mean to a place like Wilmington, Delaware, the city of Wilmington, where there's some vacancy downtown? And, my guess is there was a reason why globally, almost every city in the world, there was this move towards urbanization, where companies like Chemours, for instance, that could have been anywhere, decided they wanted to be in downtown Wilmington, was because it's all about attracting top talent, right? And so they felt, in many companies around the world feel like to attract the top talent, they need to be in an urban area where there's a rich amenity base. And so I don't think this is certainly the death of cities. I do think they get punched in the eye a little bit, but I think that they, as always, they pivot and they reinvent themselves. And so, we remain very bullish on the city of Wilmington as well as Philadelphia, New York. Never bet against New York City. I wouldn't want to be there right now, but never bet against New York. And I don't know if you have, a view towards that as well. And then we'll bring it to a close.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This is not the death of cities. I think, to your point earlier, there's a pendulum swing always. There's been, with or without a pandemic, there's usually a pendulum swing around urban suburban living, even the question of density inside a workspace, kind of a macro environment and a micro environment. I think people are frightened, and that's not to be taken lightly. However, some of the results, again, if I go back to our work from home survey about the younger generations not really thriving in this work from home environment, also comes down to a lack of connection to purpose and mission. And a lot of younger people, a lot of our top talent, especially that are coming out of cities that have excellent institutions, right, that are building this talent for us, a lot of what drives them is why are they doing what they're doing? Who are they doing it for? And a lot of that comes from really being centered in an urban environment where there's a lot of work to be done, and having a place where people feel connected to that mission and connected to the work that they're doing and who they're doing it for goes a long way in attracting and retaining that talent. Cities themselves are always positioned geographically in a place of easy access, usually around places that do generate good talent in the same way that you just described, Chris. So I don't think that's going to change. We're talking a lot about the future of education as well. That, as much as I talk about workplace education, higher education comes up against the same concerns and issues. Students want to be together for the same reason people want to be together in the workplace. So I think while there's immediate reactions to what's happening today, what's likely going to be our world for the next year or so, I think as we start to come out of this and as we find what our new position is, that pendulum's going to come back and swing the other way. So again, like, nobody should panic. Everyone should feel safe, but no one should panic, and start making broader, wider real estate moves. It's just like they say about the stock market. When you start to see it dip, you should not pull out. Like, it's the same thing for cities, in my opinion. So
I agree.
I think it's really important to really keep a level head and understand why you're there in the first place.
Gotcha. Well, listen, thank you, Dana. I think 15 years ago, we met Gensler when they designed the Wisvis Bank Center at 500 Delaware Avenue in Wilmington, Delaware. And we appreciate you giving your time and the firm's time to the state of Delaware for today's panel. And, thank you to Helena and Mike and the whole team at the State Chamber for putting this together. I think it's going to be a great day. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Happy and honored to be a part of it.